I'm proud of my instincts and my body doing what it needed to do, and the joy and just pleasant experience that came from that. It's empowering. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I left that and I'm like, I'd have all the babies. This thing that women are so terrified of, and understandably so, because we fear these things that we don't know. It is, I'm not working right now, but my last role, I was the CFO of a public company. And there are a lot of things in my work that I have been very proud of. And all of that pales in comparison to the empowerment that I feel birthing this child.
Welcome to Birth from Within, where inner wisdom meets grounded preparation. We're here to share raw, real birth stories and offer the insight and tools you need to move through the system with courage, clarity, and authority. You are made for this. Your body knows what to do. This podcast is the heart work of a nurse and a perinatal chiropractor, women who have walked our own birth journeys, and now we walk beside you. In each episode, we share practical tools, grounded wisdom, and deep reverence for your body's design. Let's return to the root, because birth doesn't start in a delivery room, birth starts from within.
Thank you, Leah, for joining us today. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story so you can inspire other moms and tell people that there's always another thing to do. First, give us a little bit of background. How many kids do you have? Hospital, birth? Tell me a little bit about you first.
Yeah, so I have 3 kids. I have a son who's 9, a daughter who's 7, and then a daughter who's 6 months old. They were all hospital births. My first 2, I was induced, and I was not for my third. But other than that, they kind of have nothing in common, any of the births. They're very different.
So you say induced. Tell me first why you were induced in the first one and how the third one, no induction.
Yeah, so for my son, I had cholestasis, which, if people aren't familiar, it's elevated bile acids in your blood. And the risks associated with that are stillbirth. And so the doctor, I would say recommend, but no, pretty much they called and were like, we're having a birthday party. You're coming to the hospital. And so I was induced with him because of that. And then with my oldest daughter, less than 2 years later, I started having the same symptoms, which is very odd itching of the hands and feet. And even though my blood results didn't show it, I was convinced I had it, and I was worried. So I was going to have an elective induction at 39 weeks. And then I had high blood pressure. No surprise, because I was worried about my daughter. So they took me in a couple of days early for an induction. And then with Violet, my youngest, who's 6 months old, there's a 7-year age gap. A lot changed for me in that time, and I've learned and grew and just started viewing things differently. And yeah, I didn't have cholestasis, and I tried to supplement and do whatever I could to prevent it from happening. And so yeah, I was able to go into labor with her.
So then tell me, how did you prepare while pregnant? Or did you prepare before being pregnant, or once you were pregnant, you were like, okay, I need to address this before it gets to that point?
So the doctor will tell you that there's really nothing you can do to help prevent cholestasis, which, okay, it's just you have a higher likelihood of having it after you have the first time or in previous pregnancies. But I actually, before I moved to this area, I have always seen chiropractors, and it was my prenatal chiropractor who we were talking about it, and she had told me to supplement with choline just to try and help ensure that the choline moves through my body. So I took supplements, but then I also, my son eats hard-boiled egg whites and he won't eat the egg yolks. And so pretty much every day, my husband would pull out the egg yolk and be like, here's your vitamin. I'm eating those. And honestly, prayer, I don't know. It was a lot of prayer. So I don't really know why I didn't have it, but.
Did you do any birth class, any birth education, childbirth education?
I didn't the third time around. We did with my first. I did like a breastfeeding class and childbirth class and everything. I did hire a doula for my third pregnancy, which I can't recommend enough. Was just awesome.
Did you hire a doula the first 2 times?
No, I never had. Mm-mm. It's kind of a weird thing because I was like, it had been 9 years plus at that point since I'd had these education classes. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I've been through this twice before. So I don't know. I thought about doing classes again, but I just never did. And I was actually more nervous, probably. I was more nervous about labor itself because even though I labored with my first two, I was induced. It was entirely in the hospital. I had never gone into labor. So, I listened to podcasts and a bunch of different things that my doula had sent me and read articles. She was a really great resource for me, but that was actually mostly my concern. I'm like, I'm not worried about giving birth or like the later part of labor, any of that. I kind of know how all that goes, but it's the going into labor in the early stages. I was very concerned with knowing when to go to the hospital. Like, how will I know when it's time to go?
Yeah, because you didn't have contractions that started for itself or water
Mm-hmm.
breaking or
Mm-hmm.
none
Yep.
of that. Yeah.
Yep.
How did your doula support you in that sense?
Well, we talked about it a lot, which was good. And then when I actually was in labor, I called her and we were talking about it then. I think I was partly concerned about knowing when to go because the hospital is about a 40-minute drive from my house. I used to live 5 minutes from the hospital before we moved here. So I think I had this fear that I was going to go and they would tell me I wasn't far enough along and then I had to go home. And I was like, I don't want to be driving back and forth in the car in labor at any stage of labor. That sounds terrible. I just remember her describing it like, she's like, there's kind of this snowball effect when you're in labor. And she's like, based on my desires and my goals, she's like, I think you want to labor at home until you reach the point where the ball's going and it's not going to stop, right? So she had described for me that a lot of women experience if they go into the hospital earlier, just kind of the change of scenery, the bright lighting, the more people, like maybe less comfortable, whatever it may be, the impact on your nervous system can slow your labor a little bit. So my goal in going in was like, I want to get there when my body's at the point where it doesn't matter, nothing's stopping it now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that you say it because what were your wishes this time?
Oddly kind of similar to the first time around. I'm going back in time, but when my first pregnancy, I thought, wow, I'd like to give birth naturally if I can, but I was like, I don't know what to expect. So I'm open to having an epidural. And, I was kind of open to just seeing what would happen. And then I was induced and that was all very different. So this time I was kind of hoping to do it naturally, but again, a little bit nervous because I don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So I was a little afraid, but with my oldest daughter, my second birth, without getting into her whole story, I was trying to have an epidural with her because I was induced, but because of just everything going on at the hospital and whole complicated factors, they finally placed it, but it was 12 minutes before she was born. So it didn't take effect. It takes about 15 minutes to go into effect, and she was born 12 minutes after I got mine. And I needed local anesthesia for my stitches. The doctor was like, let me know if you can feel this. And I was like, yes, I can. So even though that was very difficult in its own way, I had this extreme confidence that I could handle anything because I had Pitocin with her, which makes for very difficult laboring. So I knew that I could do it. I was like, I'm not worried about the ring of fire pushing her out. I'm not worried about the pain of contractions. I don't really want to go through what I went through again, but I knew that I could if I had to. My primary goal was that I wanted to go into labor on my own. I think if I just didn't have to be induced and labor started naturally, that would have been enough for me to be happy about it. But then from there, it was kind of similar. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to see what happens. If I have it naturally, great. I still kind of wanted to do that. But I think from my first experience, I knew things with my son, like it was totally blown out of the water. So I've had a pretty good mindset of like, you don't know what to expect. Be prepared for anything.
So let's walk now birth experience. Walk us through your birth story. Where were you? Who was there? What was the environment like? Did you feel supported by your birth team? Let's get into when did it all started?
Okay, it's funny thinking back. So this is for Violet, my most recent birth.
Before we go there, you said for this one, your doula was giving you resources, giving you
Yes.
articles so you can prepare yourself. Who else was part of that pregnancy team?
Oh, you were chiropractor, doula. I saw an OB. It was kind of odd because I moved at 36 weeks pregnant. So I had my same OB for the beginning of my pregnancy. And then we moved and I got a new one here at Jack's Beaches, at Baptist Beaches. And by the time I went in there, I was like, just put me to whoever, whatever doctor. I asked them to schedule me only with doctors that were on call because I was like, then I maybe have a chance of meeting the doctor that will deliver because I'm like, I know we rotate now at the end anyway. I mean, I had my OB, my doula, chiropractic care I saw throughout my whole pregnancy. I've done that all my pregnancies actually. And then really just my family, my husband, he's very supportive.
With your OB, did you feel that they were listening to you, that they were on board? Did they say, like, did you feel any kind of way?
I actually chose Baptist Beaches for that reason because I think I still have some of this ingrained fear from my first birth. And, you hear the potential for stillbirth and it's like, that just never leaves you, right? So I've always wanted to deliver at a hospital because I'm like, who knows what could go wrong? I want teams there, to intervene medically if necessary for either of us, really. But I was like, I'm much more holistic than probably most of traditional medicine. So I was trying to find the OB team that would be just the most understanding and flexible. And I was really happy with my experience with them. One of the appointments when I was here, my husband wasn't able to come to, and my doula came with me. And even that, like, they didn't care. They were, happy she was there. And yeah, it was good. I don't think I'm having any more, but if I do, I would definitely go back to them.
Okay, now is the day. Tell me, walk me through your birth experience.
It's funny looking back because for the third kid, people would even say things to me like, "Oh, so you've got this." I'm like, I don't know. I've not gone into labor before. It's like the first time. Also, 7 years is a long time as a parent with young children. You forget things. So I started early. What I now know is early labor. I was probably the whole day. It was a Friday, and I think for me, it's exciting, right? You're waiting for this whole time. I'd been hoping I would not start itching. I was like, can I please just start contracting before I start itching? Actually, to back up even further, I had started having some, like Braxton Hicks, like practice contractions a couple weeks before that. And even that was exciting to me. I'm like, my body is practicing what to do. Anyway, so then it was a Friday and I was early labor on and off all day. I was having contractions. It didn't register. I think I was saying like I think I just was more Braxton Hicks. I was like, oh, they're coming back. This is great. My body is getting ready, like sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have this baby. I was 39 weeks and I went about my whole day. I went to the water park. I remember being in the water talking to my friends. I'm like, oh yeah, it's contracting now. Like, this is great. It wasn't until probably 10 that night that I realized they were continuing, and both through activity and relaxation. Which that's one of the things they're like, if you think it's Braxton Hicks, then like relax and see if they stop. So yeah, it was finally probably right about when my husband was getting ready to go to sleep that I was like, oh, I think I'm actually in labor. But I worried that if I told him that, he wouldn't sleep and he would be the one to have to drive me to the hospital. And I needed him to be able to do that safely. So I was like, I don't know. I don't think it's much. Why don't you just go to bed? I'm going to take a bath. And I kept telling myself, I'm like, okay, try and get through like 2 hours. Try and get him to get a good 2 hour nap in so that he'll wake up refreshed.
Look how sweet. You're so concerned about him. You're the one giving birth.
You can tell I was like worried about this 40-minute drive to the hospital because I was like, oh, he's got to drive us. I wasn't registering that no matter how little sleep he had, his adrenaline would make him awake enough to do it, right? No, I was like, oh, he has to drive us there. So I'm like, why don't you just go to bed? I'll wake you up if it's labor. So then I am like, I think I did my hair. I usually have very curly hair. And I was like, I don't know what else. I can't really do much right now, but I had my exercise ball and I was like, I'll just sit in here and I'm like putting product in and doing my curls and blow drying. I'm like, whatever.
Is this at 11 p.m.? What
Yeah,
time was
somewhere. I forget if I was in the bath first. I think I did my hair first because I was comfortable. I was like, I think these are contractions, but I wasn't really in any pain.
How would you describe it? You were having contractions all day, like on and off? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. I didn't think they were. I was like, oh, it's just early signs. It could, all the stuff you read is like, if you're Googling things or I can't remember now, my brain is complete mush, but everything, it's like labor could be very soon or it could be several days away. So I was kind of like, try not to jump the gun. I don't know. So finally, yeah, I think I did my hair and then I was like, no, I'm going to get in the bathtub. And I was in the bath and I let him sleep for 2 hours. So then at 12:30, I don't remember exactly, but I know I was comfortable enough that I didn't feel like I needed him, right? Even 10 minutes after he'd fallen asleep, if I was struggling, I'd have been like, forget this, wake up, So that was fine. I woke him up at like 12:30 and I was like, I'm in labor. This is real. What do we do? So then that's when we called my doula.
What made you feel that way? That they didn't stop or that they got more intense?
Yes, both. But the intensity was odd. Okay, I'll come back to that. So we called my doula. Right. And I was like, I'm in labor. And with her too, she lives closer to the hospital. So we had this debate of, do you want me to come to your house first? Which I was like, yeah, I want you to come to my house and be here. And then we can drive to the hospital together. Or I was like, well, we'll just have to wait and see, if my water breaks right away, then maybe we'll just meet you at the hospital or depending on, we were going to see what happened. So I called her at 12:30 and she had said, she's like, okay, why don't you try and rest? Just like lay down and let it progress a little bit more. Okay. Because just based on how I was talking and sounding, I started timing them when my husband was sleeping, I think. But when you are the one contracting, I don't recommend also trying to be the one to hit the timer because I have this lovely little app. It's great. I'm like, wait, did I hit the button at the right time? I don't know. And then I would have to not look at the timer because I didn't want to play tricks on my mind of like, oh, I expect them to be about a minute or the last one was a minute long. So this one's probably going to be longer, right? I know. So I would hit the button and I wouldn't look at it. I would have the contraction. And then when I was like, oh, from my body sensation that it was over, then I would click the timer. But I don't think my timing was that great because from the app, I had one that was like out of sync. It's like I went a long, I think 16 minutes that sticks in my head between contractions. So I had this one weird anomaly where they were getting closer and closer together and they probably were down to like 7 minutes apart at that point, 6 minutes apart. But in reality, I had several that were like 4 minutes apart, but that one that was 16 was kind of bringing up the average. So I talked to her at 12:30 and I was like, yeah, they're averaging about 7 minutes apart. So all of this information, she's like, okay, why don't you try and rest? Like just try and lay down. I know it's difficult, but if you can, rest and maybe even sleep a little, then, that will be good. So I'm like, okay, I lay in bed and I swear it was like a turning point just in that moment, because I laid in bed and I was like, I can't lay in here. I feel like that's when my contractions started to become uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable. And I was like, no, I can't. I think I had 1 or 2 contractions trying to lay in bed. And I was like, I can't, I got to get out of here. I was like, I'm going to go sit in the bath. I love baths. Pregnant, not pregnant, laboring, not laboring. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm like, I'm going to go sit in the bathtub and I'll rest that way. It's still restful. And I'll listen to my Christian hypnobirthing and, this will be good. And it was maybe a half an hour or an hour later that we called her back, because I was like, this is progressing. But here I was in this, like, when do we go to the hospital? And I think at this point, my husband had woken up my parents were staying with us because we needed somebody here to stay with our older 2 children. So I think my husband had woken up my parents. At one point, this is so fascinating. I forgot this. I was like, I want my mom. Go get my mom. Because she, for probably the longest stretch of her career, was an OB nurse, and she's had 4 children. Right. And my husband is an amazing and supportive husband, but he has no knowledge in these things, right? He's not going to have any wisdom of like, I think maybe it's time for, no, that's not his strength. So I had him go wake up my mom. And then we're all kind of, she's like looking at me, and I was like, I don't know when we should go to the hospital. It was this whole debate over like when we should go to the hospital. I didn't want to go and then them not admit me and have to go like labor in the chapel until I'm dilated enough. And we had called my doula again, and she's like, you sound different now. Just the way you're breathing, the way you're talking, the way you're having to focus. We're mid-conversation, and I'm like, I stopped talking to her, obviously, because I'm having another contraction. And she's there. She's like, keep moving. She's like encouraging me through it over the phone. She's like, okay, yeah, it seems like you've turned a corner. And I was like, all right, we'll see. Like I still didn't jump to going to the hospital yet. And I distinctly remember being in the bathtub contracting, and I kept thinking, I haven't experienced natural labor before, but I have experienced a natural birth, the final stages of labor with the pressure. My second child, when they were trying to place the epidural and I was sitting on the bed all perfectly still, I had my hands in fists and I kept pushing down on the bed to raise my body up. And the nurse there, she was looking at me and she was like, you're making me nervous when you do that. I'm like, it's fine. Everything's fine. And then as soon as they were done with the epidural and left the room, I laid back and I was like, you need to go get the doctor. So I was like, I have to push. I need to push. So I'm like, I know the feeling of unmedicated having to push when the baby is there. So I was in the bathtub and I'm like, these contractions, the whole time I was like, I would describe it as discomfort. I kept waiting for this pain in my abdomen, which is how contractions are with Pitocin, at least for me. They were like extremely painful in my whole abdomen. But with my daughter, Violet, that's just not how it was. I could feel it contracting, but it was more discomfort than anything. So it really wasn't until I was like, she is pushing down. I'm like, we have to go. And it's funny because my dad is very wise. Like he was the one before any of us. He's like, she needs to go to the hospital. Like she's having the baby. She needs to go. We probably laughed a half an hour after he said that. But he also was the one who said they arrived and he was like, she'll have the baby in 3 days. So he was slightly off, but I did go into labor within 3 days. He's like, her mom's here now. She'll relax. She'll have the baby. Like her mom's here. It'll be 3 days. So he kind of gets a win on that one. Yeah. So it was probably 2:15 when we left for the hospital. And oh man, we're very safety conscious. So I'm like, I will never ride in a vehicle without a seatbelt. Right. So I'm in the back seat of the van. And I think I must have taken my seatbelt off at some point because I was like, it's the middle of the night. There was a point where I turned around because I just wanted to be on my knees. So I was like holding the back, the headrest and like pressing myself against the front seat. I think I was in like 3 different positions in the van on the way there. At one point I was sitting in the chair, but I was using my feet to press against the seat in front of me just to create pressure on my back. There's this one intersection that's kind of a weird turn on the way to the hospital. And we had only lived here 3 weeks, so I don't know the area, but I had remembered that intersection from driving to the doctor's appointments. And we were stopped at a red light there. And I just remember thinking, like, if this red light is the reason I have to push in this car, the whole car ride, it only took us 27 minutes. So the 40-minute drive in the middle of the night, there's real perks there. But somewhere right around that point, when my husband was driving, I could see the speedometer from where I was sitting. And in between contractions, I was like, you need to be safely speeding. Like, he wasn't. And I'm like, what are you doing? You need to be going at least like 10 over. We were probably halfway there. And his experience is funny because we were listening to my Christian hypnobirthing app, and it's just very calming and very positive. And he said after the fact, he's like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, you are strong. You can do this, right? This is his inner dialogue. He's like, and then you told me I needed to be speeding. And I was like, oh no, something has changed. We gotta go. I was honestly just praying the whole time that I would not feel the need to push in the car because she was dropping and she got to a lower position in the car. There was a change in the car, even. I can tell. I was like, oh, she's lower now. I was like, I really don't want to have to push in the car. Thankfully, I didn't. We made it. My husband drove up, opened the door to let me out, push of a button. Gotta love the minivan. So great. I got out hardly. I think he maybe even had to help me out because I was contracting. And I just remember walking up to the hospital doors, and it's in the middle of the night, so they don't open automatically in the middle of the night. So there's like a push button. They're like, can I help you? And I'm sitting here thinking, don't you have a camera? Can't you see me? Like, I didn't know if they did, but of course you can't express any of these things. These are all just, I'm having a nice conversation with myself, trying to get one word out. And I was like, I'm having a baby. I'm like, why do you think I'm here? So they opened the door, and I remember looking down thinking, all you have to do is get on the other side of this door. I was right there, but I must have been mid-contraction. So I got myself on the other side of the door, and I immediately dropped to all fours on the rug to get to finish my contraction. And by the time it was done, I stood up, and I think my standing up, either they did it and I didn't know, or my standing up opened the door, like triggered it to be leaving, and my husband came in. So it was good timing. And then we went in, and you kind of go down a little hallway, and I was on all fours for a contraction again, definitely thinking, how disgusting are these hospital floors that I'm just putting my hands on. But I'm like, I don't care. There's no other choice. But I was like, I had told him in the car before I couldn't speak as easily. I was like, when we get there, you need to tell them to check me right away. I was a little worried that they would be trying to have me do paperwork. And actually, a story from my aunt had come to mind when my aunt has 4 kids too. And I think it was her 4th when they were at the hospital and they were doing paperwork with her. And her husband was the one who was like, this is her 4th child. She has an extremely high pain tolerance. She's having this baby. You need to take her right now. Because she was very far along, but didn't appear to be, because she was a pro. Anyway, so I had that in my mind, and I was like, you need to tell them they need to check me immediately because like she's coming. And so I was like, just go. Like, I'm sitting here contracting. He wanted to stay with me, of course. I'm like, go get them. And you turn, and there's this really, really long hallway. And that was where I was contracting. Because I remember just looking like, how am I going to get down this really long, ridiculously long, mile-long hallway, it felt like. So he went and got somebody, and they're coming, and she was like, do you want a wheelchair? But I was in between contractions, and I was like, I'm okay. I turned the corner to the triage room, and they're like, okay, you'll be in this bed here. It must have been 20 feet away. I don't know. I was like, okay, dropped to all fours again. I was like, I can't make it to the bed. And then after that contraction, like set down my water bottle, kicked off my shoes. I'm pretty sure I just pulled my underwear off. I was in my like labor and delivery gown, and I made it to the bed and was on my back, and they checked me, and she was like, you're like 9 centimeters. And in my head, I was like, oh God, they won't send me home.
You made it.
Yeah, I made it. I didn't have to push in the car. They won't be sending me home. I did have this sense when I was like, we're going to go to the hospital. There was definitely a point where I know I said it out loud. I was like, this was dumb. Like, I want the epidural. Let's go get one. And actually, I had a doula in Naples where I lived before because I had been planning to give birth there. And she was the one who had told me, she's like, I had all these questions. I'm like, well, I want the epidural. Will I be able to handle it? She's like, it's good to see how you're feeling in between contractions. She's like, in the middle of a contraction, you're going to want it all. It's going to be painful. You're going to want anything and everything. But in between contractions, that's really more when it's better to gauge how you really feel and what interventions you really want to do, right? So yeah, before we left for the hospital, I was like, this was stupid. Let's go. If I'm not far enough along to have the baby, even in the car, I was like, I'm either going to be like 3 or 4 centimeters or 9. I was like, I don't know. I'm like, birth is either extremely painful and difficult, like people think it is, and I'm only 3 or 4 centimeters. And in that case, I'm getting the epidural and I'm going to relax. And I don't care how long it takes for this baby to come, or I'm arriving and giving birth. There was no in between in my mind. I'm like, it's one of these two things. So yeah, I was 9 centimeters. After they checked me, I immediately flipped to all fours and vaguely remember somebody saying, oh, is it okay for us to transport you on the bed? I'm like, yeah, whatever. I was like, I'm in a bed. I made it to the hospital. I'm on a bed. Like, it wasn't the hospital room bed. It was triage and they were moving me on it. But I was like, I did it. If I have a baby in the hospital hallway on this bed, like, I made it. I didn't, thankfully. They got me into the room and the timing worked out. In between contractions, I stepped down and got into the other bed. Even they were like, we can move you. I'm like, it's fine. No, I got into the other bed. And then it was a very like whirlwind. My doula made it shortly after we got into our room. And so she was like setting a nice atmosphere, like lighting, music, things like that. The doctor was not there. It was not long after I was in that room. Oh, well, the nurse did the monitor and she was just holding it on me. And I talked to her about it after the fact. I was like, I felt bad. You just were holding it there. And she was like, I just knew we weren't going to be there very long. There was really no need to strap you all in and everything. Yeah, it wasn't long before my water broke. Either the doctor had just gotten there or she wasn't yet. But before my water broke, I maybe had like 3 more contractions in that room before my water broke. And it's interesting the things you forget, because in my first 2 births, my water had been broken in the hospital and it like didn't even register with me. Probably even as I'm talking about not wanting to have to push in the car, people probably would have put towels in their car in case their water had broken. I didn't, like, nowhere in my mind did I think to do that. I'm very thankful. I wouldn't have wanted to clean that up. But yeah, so then my water broke and my doula was there. Oh, and Steve was trying to do counter pressure. I'm like, I love you. Just have my doula do it. She's so much better. So she was doing all my counter pressure, which felt so good. So she was right there when my water broke. She was like, oh, that probably feels so good. Like, it relieves so much pressure, very reassuring, calming, everything. And I had this panic moment of like, oh my goodness, I thought we were almost done. I was like, the pressure, I know we're near the end. And then my water broke and I was like, what if the pressure I was feeling was just my water? And how much more of this do I have now? And then I was like, and the water's not there. It's going to get more painful, all in this like split second. And I said to her, I was like, can I do it? I was like, can I do this? Kind of funny because you're doing it. Like, you're or not, you're there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like, there's no other course of action now. She was very reassuring and very calming. She was like, yes, you can. And I think after my water broke, it was like 2.5 pushes before Violet was born. I mean, like 2.5 more contractions. She was there very, very quickly afterward, and I could do it. That was good. What I loved about it being there is like, I stayed on my hands and knees the whole time. No one ever even asked if I wanted to get on my back, which I don't think that's necessarily always the case in a hospital environment. I think it's probably pretty rare. Even my mom had said that. She's like, even back when she was working and things were just inherently more natural, they were only beginning to do epidurals and things like, she's like, even for us, we would always have the patient go on their back for pushing. Nobody ever even suggested it to me. There was some talk at one point I was like, is the doctor coming? Like, I kept asking because in my head, I'm like, am I going to have this baby without the doctor here? And they were like, she's on her way. And I'm in my head, my sister-in-law is Ghanaian. And in Ghanaian culture, it's very common to be like, I'm coming. But that might mean like I'm getting in the shower, I'm making breakfast, like I'm coming doesn't necessarily mean like in America, like I'm in the car driving to you. And in this moment, I'm like, are we all Ghanaian in here? Like I can handle it. I am strong enough for you to tell me we don't know if she's going to make it. But they don't want to tell you that when you're about to have a baby. But I personally do better with information. In fact, it wouldn't scare me. I'm like, does this mean you've just called her and you like woke her up and she's getting ready? Does this mean she's in the car? Does this mean she's somewhere else in the hospital and has to make her way here? Like the whole range of anything that it could mean, but I didn't know. At one point, my doula and the nurse, I think my doula had asked, she was like, have you ever caught a baby before? And she was like, I have. And my doula was like, okay, me too. Unofficially. Like I was asking the nurse, I was like, I forget what I even asked, but I asked her some question where her response was, I won't let her fall. So in my head, I was like, okay, because I know the rules is like only the doctor can deliver the baby, like can catch her. And I was like, do I need to be positioning differently to like catch her myself? I had envisioned, I think my goal, I was like, I wanted to give birth in a more of a squat position because when my son was born, one of the greatest things ever about his birth was, remember, I had the epidural for him. It was very peaceful and calming. And when I was pushing, he was coming out and the doctor was like, do you want to pull him up? And so I reached down and I pulled him up to me when he was born, which was just the coolest thing. And so I had been thinking like, maybe I will drop the floor out of the bed and I'll birth in more of a supported squat position so that when she comes out, I can pull her up. Right. But I'm sitting here and that was out of my mind. And the time I was on all fours, I was very comfortable. I was not changing positions, but I was like, worried that I'm supporting myself. I can't really grab her. I was worried that, they were going to let her drop. So the nurse, she was like, I won't let her fall. I was like, okay. And they're going to break the rules and deliver her if they have to. We're going to be fine. But the doctor did make it, I think like right around my water breaking, right before or right after. And yeah, I don't know. It was like perfect.
So the doctor was there to catch the baby then?
The doctor was there to catch the baby. Everything was above board. It was great. And then I remember, how some things feel like a very, very long time. Actually, my doula took a lot of photos, which I loved. I never had that for my previous births. And I look back at them fairly often. I'm like, oh, you don't have that view. And you're so like most of the things I'm describing is all just really this internal dialogue because you can't really speak. You're just speaking the necessary words at a bare minimum. And you're just so much in your head that it becomes a little bit blurry. It was fun for me, and it still is, to look back. And I remember being on all fours and seeing her for the first time, right? Like when she came out, the doctor like placed her on the bed. She was right underneath me. And then I could see they're suctioning her. And, it felt like forever. But in my head, I was like, so, can I have her now? Like, she's just hanging out there, right? And eventually I was like, well, whatever, she's my baby. And I just reached down and I grabbed her. And, she's cord is still attached. And so then I kind of like leaned back. So I was on my knees and then they helped me turn around so that I could lay back with her. But It's, to me, I'm like this, it felt like such a forever long thing. But if I look back at the timestamp on the photos of her being down on the bed and in my arms are the same minute. I always think that's funny. I'm like, oh, I didn't just let her sit there forever. It just felt that way to me. I pretty quickly was like, you suctioned her? Great. She's mine now. And I'm holding her to me.
What part of your birth are you most proud of?
I think the fact that it was natural, but it's less proud and more like I didn't know birth could be that way. It's such a just natural and beautiful, and it's difficult, sure, but like it wasn't, like I didn't go to the hospital probably as soon as I should have because I was expecting more pain, right? Like there was discomfort, but it was manageable. Like it's very empowering to know like I can do this. And more so, I think I'm proud of my body knowing what to do and my instincts, although I definitely questioned my instincts, right? Like I maybe would have left for the hospital a little bit sooner, but I was questioning myself because of these expectations that I had for contractions to be a certain way or, for things to line up how they are, like 5-minute contractions or whatever they say, 4 minutes, whatever it was. Like I'm proud of my instincts and my body doing what it needed to do and the joy and just pleasant experience that came from that. It's empowering. I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I left that and I'm like, I'd have all the babies. This thing that women are so terrified of, and understandably so, because we fear these things that we don't know. It's like, it is, I'm not working right now, but my last role, I was the CFO of a public company. And there are a lot of things in my work that I have been very proud of. And all of that pales in comparison to the empowerment that I feel birthing this child.
Yeah. You had the first 2 times being induced, Pitocin versus no Pitocin now. That's a big change, right?
Yeah. I know when we first got to the hospital and they were like, we'll start her IV. I think they said like in case of afterbirth pit. And I was like, no. I'm like there, like eyes closed, like, no. And my doula, she was like, I think it's okay to we'll just cap the IV, right? These are things she and I had talked about beforehand. So I love that because she knows, like I tell everybody, I'm like, get a doula because she knows this. She knows the things to ask, the things, she had this knowledge already where we had this discussion and I was like, yeah, they can put an IV in me. I don't care. Right. I know myself that I want to have the option for hospital intervention if in the rare case something dire is happening. So I understand and accept that you're going to put an IV in me. That way, if I'm crashing or something and they need to intervene, then they can take life-saving measures, right, quickly. But I'm like, I want it capped. I don't really want anything, So she already had known that. So all I can get out is no. That's me saying, no, you're not giving me Pitocin. And they really, they would have wanted to. They did not push it. Again, I was very thankful. They did not push it. But my bleeding after birth, it was longer than they would have maybe been comfortable with. I question, is it really totally normal and just maybe not their normal? Because I think most mothers have Pitocin after birth. But I didn't have any. They just kept an eye on me. And they did some massage, which I was like, okay, I know some people don't like that, but I was like, it's fine, whatever. I had the baby. She's here. She spent the first 2 hours on me, which when I had my first 2 kids, it was an exciting thing that the baby, you did skin to skin for the first hour. And I love that. She didn't leave me at all for 2 hours. They were like, we'll take notes of what we can. And they're like, we'll weigh her later. It'll be fine. And so she nursed in like the first half an hour. It was really great. We got to just be together through that time.
This is a great story to know that you don't need all the interventions, to know that you have a right into yes or no as something as simple as an IV.
Yeah.
And You can absolutely do this. I would
Yeah.
say it's more like knowing, right? Where are those providers that are going to be more okay and open with having a natural birth? Because
I would,
birth is
yeah,
not a sickness or a disease. It's
no,
it's all a natural thing.
I would not birth at just any hospital. I would not. I am so drawn to the idea of a home birth. For me personally, I don't know if I could. If I ever have another baby, I would definitely look into some of the sort of middle ground options like a birthing center. I know my doula actually, I had already gotten lined up with the OB team here before I met my doula because I was like, we can't move unless I can have the baby there, right? And even my old doula in Naples, she was good. She's like, look, worst case scenario, you have to drive back here for your appointments as long as you can, and then have them physically print all of your paperwork. And then when you go to the hospital, hand them your paperwork because she's like, you can walk into a hospital and give birth, like they'll take you, they'll deliver you. And she's like, as long as they have all your records, they'll know you didn't refuse care, whatever. So I had all this planned out, but I had already like gotten lined up with the OB and she had a few recommendations for me. She's like, oh, if you want to look into like a birth center and like a midwife group or something, she's like, you could look into these too. But I was moving at 36 weeks pregnant. So I'm like, I got a doctor already. I did it. We're going here. Like, I can't add another thing to my plate. But I think if I did in the future, I would look into more of like a birth center, because I think that timing fear that would have been dispelled a bit, because if I went to the birth center, they probably would have a bathtub for me to labor in. The atmosphere may be more resembling my home than the hospital. So we tell everybody, my husband parked the car and Violet was born 23 minutes later. Not from when I was admitted, not from from the time he parked the car. She was born. It was 23 minutes. So all of this, me on all fours on the hospital floor, 23 minutes. That worked out great for me because the whole snowball effect that I had mentioned, I can barely even tell you what that hospital looks like because I was so focused. When we left to bring her home, I was like, oh, this is where the nurse's station is. So the ball was going. It was not stopping for anything once we got there. So in that case, it worked really well. But I do think it might have been a little less stressful to get there a little bit sooner. Yeah, maybe not though. I don't know. It was great.
I mean, you labor at home as long as you could.
I did.
And then made it easy in the hospital because, yeah, once you get there, there's so many interventions that you might get into, push into, and fear into that
Yes.
it can disrupt the whole thing. So you were very lucky getting in there, those 23 gold minutes.
I think this all the time. I have not tried to go back to my records to see, but I am curious what my levels were when I was diagnosed with cholestasis with my son, because the way that I understood it, it was very like, you have it or you don't. And actually my doula, she's like, I love science and knowledge and everything. So she even kind of will take the reins and do a lot of research. And so we talked a lot about cholestasis and she would research different aspects of it with me. And of course, that's not how it is. It's your levels can be anywhere, And so I forget what the measurements are, but it's more like if you're over 10, you're diagnosed, but it could be up to like 100. And I don't think it will serve me to actually know. So I'm not looking, but I wonder, I'm like, was I at 11 or was I at 75? And these are some of the things where I think traditional medicine, understandably, they have all the lawsuits in OB and everything, but there's been a shift toward protecting the hospital as opposed to just doing maybe what's best for the mom and baby. But I do wonder that. I'm like, was I to such a strong degree that the risks were very high and it was the best thing for him for us to go in and be induced? Or was it on the lower end? Could I have just had additional monitoring? I don't know. But those are
the importance of education too.
Yeah. Well, and I think about those things because I was preparing for that for Violet. I was really expecting any day. And actually, I did go get my blood drawn I had some itching. I forget how soon it was before she was born, but somewhere between 36 and 39 weeks. And I called the hospital and I was like, this is much less than when I'd had it historically. I also knew I am going to be hyper aware of any itching that I have on my wrists or my hands because of this past experience, right? I even said to them, I think if I were a mother that had never had cholestasis, this wouldn't even cross her mind as something to look into. But because I have, and because I know I have this history and a higher likelihood, I'm like, can I get my blood drawn just for a sense of peace, right? And I got it drawn and it was negative, thankfully. But I was prepared. I was like, okay, if it's positive, what are we going to do? And I was prepared to push back more than I ever had. Logically, I would think if I could be monitoring, then there would be signs like, ooh, the heart rate's dropping a little. Let's go see the doctor, right? These are the things that I wish could be different. And maybe one day they will be.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your awesome 23-minute story.
23 minutes. Takes longer to tell the story than to live it.
To close out, what would you tell another mom who is about to give birth?
Get a doula. For one thing, especially a first-time mom. I think first-time moms end up being pushed into things because there's just so much that they don't know. So I do think that having a doula helps with that, just the education and the support. But yeah, get a doula and research. Don't just blindly accept whatever a hospital might tell you.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
The information provided in this podcast is not medical advice. It is anecdotal and for general knowledge and informational purposes only. It is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have. The use of this information is at your own risk.